Civil disobedience, as I put it to the audience, was not the problem, despite the warnings of some that it threatened social stability, that it led to anarchy. The greatest danger, I argued, was civil obedience, the submission of individual conscience to government authority. Such obedience led to the horrors we saw in totalitarian states, and in liberal states it led to the public's acceptance of war whenever the so-called democratic government decided on it. In such a world, the rule of law maintains things as they are. Therefore, to begin the process of change, to stop a war, to establish justice, it may be necessary to break the law and to commit acts of civil disobedience. And this week's opening quote comes from Howard Zinn. Welcome to Surviving the Matrix. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Maxwell Egan. It's a pleasure to be with you once again, and I will be your host for the next hour. Well, folks, it's certainly been an interesting ride over the last 6 or 7 years on this show, hasn't it? The world has definitely changed since I started doing this show in 2008. When I began doing this program, when I first began on American Voice Radio, the world was in a pretty bad state at that time, and it was because the world was in such a bad state that I actually began putting out the slideshows on YouTube, which led to the radio show. And I really felt that if I could get the message out to people in a calm enough and comprehensive enough manner, then things really would change if people got to hear what was really going on. But I tell you, folks, if we thought the world was in a bad state in 2008, well, here in 2014, it really has deteriorated in an exponential manner. It really has, and right around the world, we're seeing a huge escalation in the control grid, and a huge escalation in the environmental damage that's being done. It's really interesting looking at the amount of environmental damage that's being done by our governments, all while they're screaming out, let's save the world from global warming, and let's save the world by being sustainable, and let's do all this stuff which is going to be great and green and all this sort of stuff, but we'll just frack the country while we're doing it and destroy all of the water table, and we'll spray the skies full of toxic chemicals. We'll continue to let Monsanto genetically alter everything in our environment. We'll continue to wage bankers' wars and cover the world with depleted uranium, and we'll allow Fukushima to continue pouring radioactive waste into the Pacific Ocean. That seems to be the general consensus of governments around the world at the moment, and it really does make one wonder. Because as I said, folks, if we thought things were bad in 2008, well, I give you 2014. Not that we can't still fix things, but things are getting harder to repair as the day goes on. Mainly because people are still so divided from each other. They just don't know how to put down all this stuff they have with each other. Actually, putting down stuff. Someone commented on one of my YouTube clips the other day that people are never going to put down their stuff. They like their stuff too much. I think the person is thinking that when I say put down your stuff, I'm saying give away all your material possessions. What I'm actually saying is put down all of the fictional mental stuff that you have with other people. The stuff that keeps you divided, the stuff that causes you to judge yourself poorly and causes you to judge other people poorly. And that's what I'm saying when I say put down all of your stuff. I'm talking about mental stuff, judgment, because unfortunately most people have stuff with each other. Something else this person also said was, we ain't ever going to stop with this insanity until someone stops us. But of course, he can't speak for everybody else, he can only speak for himself. So what that statement actually said was, You are never going to stop my insanity until someone stops me. You see, that's the issue, folks, is that we won't act until someone else acts and we can follow their lead. And that's the problem. But the reality is that we cannot speak for other people. We can only speak for ourselves. And so what we are actually delivering with such a statement is our own mental state, our own mindset. That's the thing, you see, people. Nobody is willing to take control of themselves. No one's willing to act until other people act. You're never going to get the world to do that. What you're saying is you're never going to get me to do that. And that's the unfortunate thing, folks, is that people just like to hang on to all the stuff they have with other people. And it is in that mindset that lies the heart of the matter. And a lot of people also contact me and say, look, Max, you've been doing these videos for years, you've been bringing this information to us for years, but what is the solution to all of these problems that you keep presenting us with? And folks, the solution is common unity in the community. That is the solution. Think about it for a minute. If you put down all of the judgment you have with people around you, and everybody did it, and we stood up as a united community, and we told our trustees, our public trustees, euphemistically referred to as government, that we're simply not going to follow their rules anymore. What we are going to do is take the moral high ground in all of our actions, then the world would change in one single day. That is the solution. And it has to start with grassroots movements. It's got to start by you putting down your stuff, putting down your judgment with other people, and turning and applying that new understanding to the world around you at large. If we all did that, the world would change in a single day. That's the solution, folks. There is no political remedy to this situation. And it may seem like an impossible task, but if you start doing that in your community now and it ripples out through your community, then the world will change. If people had started doing this 7 years ago when I first started bringing this information to the world would be a very, very different place now. That's the thing. That's the solution, folks. People are looking for the solution, but they're looking for a form to fill out or a movement to join or some group they can sign up to, some political party they can vote into office that is going to change the world for them without them having to act themselves. That's the thing. We all want change, but we're only prepared to fill out a form and hand it to someone else and then expect them to bring about the changes that we want. We're not prepared to do it ourselves, and that is where the problem lies, folks. In fact, a person looking for remedy to our current situation in any source which is external to themselves is like a man swimming up a river searching for a drink of water. The solution is you. The solution has always been you. It's just that we've all been looking for an external remedy because we don't want to take responsibility for ourselves, and that is the heart of the problem. It's so simple, folks, and it's so obvious that I just don't know why people can't seem to see it. I mean, sure, this is a completely insane society. There is no denying that fact. The political system is insane. The corporate system is insane. The rules that we allow ourselves to be constrained by are completely insane. The actions of our politicians are insane. The fact that war still exists is insane. The fact that depleted uranium is used in war is insane. The fact that there are starving people while we have the knowledge and the ability to feed so many more than what we do, and we have warehouses of food that get thrown out, is insane. But the thing is that we live in such an insane society because we don't know ourselves and we remain divided from each other. That's the thing, you see. That is the problem, and being aware of the problem in that manner presents the solution to you by default. It's so simple, folks. It's the division that perpetuates this whole meme, this whole insane society that we live in. And so all we have to do is truly realize what we are ourselves, what your body is, what your consciousness is, what you are. And See the validity and the beauty of yourself. And then when you truly can grasp that, then you see it in others immediately by default. And then things change. And we could do it, folks. We could change the world in a single day if people simply shifted their perspective of who and what they are. Because by doing so, you shift your perspective of who and what other people are. And suddenly all the barriers break down. And then we have the potential to bring about some real change. I mean, we could stand up against this corrupt government in Australia in a second and dismiss the lot of them if the people would simply put down all of the bullshit that they have with each other. And it is complete and utter bullshit, folks. It's a program. It's a behavioral system that people have been programmed into having and programmed into living, and we don't have to do any of it. The difficult part is getting people to see the simplicity of that fact. And it is a very, very simple fact, folks. All we have on the planet here are people. That's it. People. People created society. Society created government. Government created all of these rules because we needed someone to manage our infrastructure for us. That's why we created government. Only now we find ourselves in a position where government rules us, and unfortunately they rule us with an iron fist, mostly due to the lack of intellect and utter stupidity of most of the modern police force. As I mentioned last week, folks, the sheer lack of intellect that we are seeing in our current crop of police officers and their willingness to be blindly obedient to whatever sociopath orders whatever rules to them is really the biggest problem we face as a society, because these morons are actually working to destroy the country under the pretext of upholding the law. It's absolutely absurd, folks. And it's really come to be that way, folks, that the sheer stupidity of modern police is the biggest threat the world faces. Because when you look at the modern police force, folks, what we've got here is a global government-controlled army of armed morons. And unfortunately, it's true, folks. It's true. I mean, when you look at the police force, you've got a global army of very stupid people who are armed with deadly weapons. And this is not a good thing. I mean, just think about it, folks. That's really what we're up against, isn't it? Utterly subservient morons with guns. And this is truly the biggest problem we face as a global family. And it's unfortunate to realise that, because we actually created a police force to keep us safe, but what the police are doing now is simply enforcing corporate corruption and working as hard as they can to make sure that this planet becomes uninhabitable as quickly as possible. And that's a scary thing, and that is truly something that can only be overcome by a united community that is willing to stand up for itself. And as I keep saying, folks, that's not going to happen until you respect yourself enough to respect other people. And if you don't respect other people, all I can say is, why don't you respect yourself? Why don't you get to know yourself enough that you can respect yourself? And if you don't respect people around you and you claim that you do respect yourself, well, then you're lying to yourself, because you don't. Because if you don't respect others, then you don't know who you are. And it's as simple as that. And it gets very frustrating for me, folks, because I've been beating this same drum for 7 years and I'm watching the world deteriorate around me when the solution to all of our problems could be so very simple. And sure, if people think that isn't the way and this is a pipe dream and I'm living in fairyland, well, that's fine. Try applying it to your own life and see the difference that it makes, because it certainly made a difference to mine. And sure, infiltrate the system, create a political party, do whatever you want. But when you create that party, use moral parameters for the party. Use moral parameters for everything you do. Don't comply with any rules or any laws or any legislation which interferes with your moral compass. And always, always, always question authority on every single occasion that anybody tries to exert any right of ownership over you. Question their actions, folks. Do it every single time it happens. Don't just blindly do what people tell you to do. Ask them why you are required to do this and what makes them believe they have any right of ownership over you. Imagine if the whole country started doing this. It would be the end of the system in a day. Problem is, people won't do it because they don't want to rock the boat. They want change, but they're not prepared to implement that change themselves. They want to see a free humanity on this planet, but they're not prepared to stand in the freedom that they already have. They're not prepared to show that they're free themselves and to be free and to question why anyone would consider that they are not. They're not prepared to do it until they see other people doing it. They want someone to save the world for them so that then they can just go on through their life and say, isn't it all nice now? It doesn't work that way, folks. If you want the world to change, it's only going to happen once you choose to participate yourself and start bringing about that change in your own life. You've got to be the change you want to see in the world, folks. That's how we do it. And look, I know it's all very well for me to just sit here and say that. You've got to be the change you want to see. But it's very difficult for people in the normal world, in inverted commas, to be able to do this because everybody is forced to run on the treadmill. If they don't, then they don't have a roof over their heads and they don't have food on the table. And everybody's forced to pay taxes. Everybody's forced to participate in the system to a certain degree. Hell, I live on the outside of the system. I have for my whole life. But even in doing so, I still have to participate in the system. I still have to use money. I have to get a passport. I have to have a license to drive a car and all of this sort of stuff. I mean, I can do it without it. I could get my own plates and put them on my car. I could drive around without a license, but I don't want to run and hide anywhere, and I don't want to have to deal with police every 5 minutes to try to explain to them that I don't have to comply with their rules because, frankly, they're too stupid to even understand what real law is. And so it's a pointless exercise for me to do that. There's no use me putting private plates on my car until everybody puts private plates on their car. And we're not going to see that happen until vast amounts of the population wake up and realise that the system is fiction. So we're all forced to operate within the parameters of this system. But my argument with this whole thing is that if we had that common unity of community, if we'd stop ripping each other off and stop judging each other by past transgressions and focused on the problem that actually caused all of these transgressions, then we would be able to heal the world very quickly. Because frankly, folks, there are bigger fish to fry. Any past transgressions that anybody had, anybody who's done anything bad to you probably did so because they were in a state of shortage, they were in a state of what they perceived to be social decline or whatever you want to call it, because they believed the social parameters by which we should judge ourselves are real. All of this stuff that's been put into people's minds, it's all fiction. And people were never given an even playing field to begin with, and so most people mess up at some stage in their lives. And then we go through our lives holding grudges against these people when they didn't really know what they were doing. They were operating according to fictional parameters on an uneven playing field. And so it's no wonder that most people mess up at some stage or other. We're going to put all that stuff behind us, folks. It's all stuff that happened back then. And we have far, far bigger issues to deal with. When you look at the world today, we've got our governments out of control, destroying all of our countries by polluting groundwater. This is an incredibly serious issue. And not only that, but we've got an army of armed thugs who are supposed to be there to protect the people who are actually enforcing this corporate rape of our countries and this destruction of our water table. This is a serious issue. And we can sit here and fight amongst each other over all these little petty past transgressions all we like. But while we continue to do that, we're allowing the world around us to be destroyed. And in another 10 years, we're not going to have a country to live in if we allow things to go down the path that they're going. Because once this gets put in place, and once this destruction starts, then the amount of damage it causes to our environment will be seen in an exponential curve. The contamination of groundwater in this country, once it starts, will reach cataclysmic proportions incredibly quickly if we don't nip this in the bud now. And that's where our focus should be. And we've got to stop playing by the rules that the governments give us, folks. We've got to start realising these people are public trustees. And if any politician in this country is supporting coal seam gas and they cannot produce the results of the study which conclusively shows this does not damage the water table, then that politician is in abuse of office, is in breach of trust, and should be dismissed and tried immediately. This is not a debatable point. And that's the pathway we have to go down with this issue. And that should be the same in every country. Every country that is allowing their water table to be destroyed because of fictional rules that some sociopathic politician wrote on a piece of paper needs to stand up for themselves and get these people to show cause where they shouldn't be held accountable for their actions. It's as simple as that. We can't allow our world to be destroyed, the population impoverished and discarded simply because politicians write rules on pieces of paper. It's got to the point where people have really got to step above the fiction and see the absolute absurdity of our situation, the absolute stupidity of allowing public trustees to destroy the planet because they wrote rules on paper. It is so stupid that I just can't believe the human race can't see reality and can't see above the fiction. It's mind-boggling to me, folks. It's absolutely mind-boggling how anybody could believe that this system is real and how anybody could believe that by upholding its parameters they are in any way, shape or form doing the right thing. It defies all logic. It defies any rational consideration. It defies any intelligent analysis that the human race would allow this to happen. And I think it's about time we all stood up and woke up to reality. And I really don't know what it's going to take for this to happen. I mean, as I said near the start of the show, I really thought if I spoke calmly and rationally and concise to people, things would change. But in the last 7 years, all I've seen is things deteriorate. As much as I've seen people waking up around me, I've seen so much deteriorating in the world as well, because even the people who are waking up are just failing to apply their new knowledge to the world in which we live. Many people are just going into fear. Of course, many people are distracted with running on the treadmill and distracted by their own loss of self, which has been an incredible part, an incredible method of control that's been used to contain people, is ensuring that they all experience a loss of self. I've mentioned before the loss of people's natural sexuality is a big part of it as well. You know, we're controlled very much via sexual means, folks. The loss of sexuality, the loss of natural sexuality, and turning sex into what it has become today. The loss of not only the divine feminine, but also the divine masculine. You know, there's no divine nurturing feminine power, very little of it, and there's certainly no divine masculine protection power in our society. We've been taught that we can't operate by these parameters anymore. And the whole promotion of the body image and the young and beautiful people and all of this sort of stuff, it's all based on sexuality. And yet sexuality is the most taboo topic in our society. It's something you never talk about, but it's something that's plastered in your face all the time, but you're never allowed to talk about it or to acknowledge it as being sexual. And this is something that creates an incredible schism in human consciousness and keeps people distracted by default all the time, because people are always thinking about sex in the back of their minds. They may not like to admit that they are, but most people are thinking about sex most of the time. It's going on in the back of their minds. Even if they're doing something else, they're having sexual thoughts, simply because their natural sexuality has been so repressed, and sexuality is as natural to people as eating, sleeping, drinking, or breathing. But we are trained to view things very, very differently than that, and this causes an incredible and very profound loss of self in everybody. Well, everybody in the Western world anyway, everybody in civilization, in inverted commas. That's kind of what civilization is. It gets you locked into a little box, but removes you from yourself. And that's its purpose, folks. And I'm not suggesting that we all become uncivilized and move back to the Stone Age. I mean, civilization could work if it was accompanied by proper education into reality, rather than indoctrination into a business system, which is what we've got at the moment. We've got an economic and social indoctrination system masquerading as education, but it really doesn't educate people in anything they need to know at all. All it does is train people to be good, obedient little worker drones for the corporate model, and that is the last thing humanity needs. So yes, well anyway, folks, I guess we know what the problems are. The question is, what do we do about it? What do we do to address the current situation, the current human dilemma? Well, step number one, folks, you've got to get information to people. Letterbox drops, drop DVDs into people's mailboxes, gather some crowdfunding together and start putting full-page ads in your local newspapers. Start putting billboards up in the street. Start writing to people. Start making as much noise as you can. Start ringing into radio talk shows and television talk shows and everywhere you can to start spreading information to people. Because if you know what is going on in the world and you can see the situation that we are in, then you have a responsibility to share that information with people. That's step one. We need to create a groundswell of awareness of what is going on in the world, and we need to create a groundswell of awareness of what the solution is, because the solution is to put down our differences with each other, stop being so divided from each other, and to stand in unity together and hold our public trustees accountable for their actions through the sheer weight of numbers that is mankind. That's the solution, and it has to be grassroots. It has to be implemented by people on the ground. And if you are listening to this show, then that is you. That's how we do it, folks. We have to get information out to people. That's the most important thing we can do. And we have to make as much noise about this system as possible. Make as much noise about fluoride as possible. Ask your public trustees why they don't address the fact that the Lancet magazine has recently named fluoride as a neurotoxin, and ask them why they are putting a neurotoxin into your water supply. And if people are so stupid that they won't look at this and they don't care that the council is putting a neurotoxin in their water supply, then you can perhaps turn that around and use their own lack of concern about this as a very good indication of how well it's working on them. Because that's the fact of the matter, folks. You tell people they're being poisoned by their council and they just don't care, which just shows how well the poison is working. And to me, folks, that's another thing that I've always found mind-boggling. You tell people they're being poisoned by something that dulls their senses and they can't even be bothered looking it up. And then I just say to them, well, that just shows how well it works. Because I've just told you that you're being poisoned and you don't even care enough to look it up to see if I'm telling the truth. So yes, what a pickle we seem to find ourselves in, folks. And look, if you're someone who is watching this radio show on the YouTube clip that comes out after the show, why don't you post in the chat box beneath the video clip what you think the solutions are, what you think we could do, what steps could be implemented in your local community that you believe may make a difference. Because if you post there and offer suggestions to other people, well, perhaps they may be able to implement these suggestions in their own community. Because that's the thing, folks. I mean, people are always saying to me, Max, you present us with all these problems, but you never present us with the solution. And, well, I think the solution is common unity in the community. I think the solution is for people to realise that the legal system is fiction, to realise what government is, they're just public trustees, and to put down all of our fictional division with each other and simply stand in united respect for each other. And I think we would change the world in a day if we did that. So that's my solution. But if you're saying this isn't going to work because you're just not going to do it, then please do offer what solutions you have that you believe will work. And if you don't have any solutions, or you're not interested in finding any solutions, then why do you even come and bother watching the YouTube clips? Why do you even bother listening to this show? Because really, I think what we need to be focusing on is solutions. We can look at the problems all we like, folks. We can point the finger down different rabbit holes and say, oh, look, they're doing this and they're doing that. Really, there's only one problem, and that is that all of our governments are completely and utterly corrupt, and they remain that way because we are completely and utterly divided amongst ourselves. So to me, that's the solution. It doesn't matter what we do in the political arena, what we do in the legal arena. If we don't address the fact that we live in divided communities, then it's all going to be for naught. I think that's where the focus needs to be, because that is ultimately the problem. The problem is in our hearts. The problem is that we are divided amongst each other. And so we live in divided communities, and we don't have the strength of numbers that is necessary to stand in defiance of this system. To me, that is the problem, regardless of all of the symptoms that we see manifest throughout the corruption of the system. Because each one of these things is simply a symptom. Like I said, it's not a problem to itself, although it may be. The whaling may be a problem, the oil spills may be a problem, Fukushima may be a problem, the war may be a problem, the homelessness may be a problem, but ultimately they are all symptoms of a greater problem, which is government corruption that exists because of the divided nature of our society. So to me, that's the solution. I can't see any other solution that will work. Anything else, anything that we attempt to construct within the parameters of the system is simply going to be a temporary band-aid that will eventually fall off and reveal something even more rotten beneath, because that's the way the system goes. I don't believe that there is any political remedy. I don't believe any political remedy will ever be found. I really don't. I don't think the system is designed that way. And so that's my suggestion anyway, folks, is that we all respect each other. I know it seems right out of left field and something that most people simply don't want to do, but to me, that is the only thing that is ever going to fix this problem. It's the only solution that I can find which will actually work anyway. And I say that because it's the only thing I can think of which addresses the actual problem we are facing, which is the division and lack of respect mankind generally holds for the rest of mankind. And again, it's difficult to judge people as being bad for the lack of respect they show others. It's simply a program that they're running. It's a result of the parameters of this system. You know, we've got a system that trains us to be competitive, that trains us to measure ourselves and everybody else by parameters which are not our own, and which prevents us by all means possible from ever experiencing the true art of ourselves, the true art of our lives. That's the system that we've got. And so the result of this is that people live in a state of what is essentially fractured consciousness. They do. They don't know whether they're coming or going. They don't know which way is up, which way is down. They rarely know the tiniest detail about themselves, really, about the true nature of themselves. They only know what they perceive from the outside, because people tend to look at themselves from the outside. They look at themselves in the mirror, the reflection in the mirror. That's what they see. They don't ever truly see themselves for what they are, generally speaking. Most people in our society are never ever taught to look at things from that way. It's all about the surface reflection and the face that you show others. It's never about who and what you actually are. And that's where the problem lies. You know, I've got so much faith in mankind to wake up to reality and shake off their shackles. I really do, and that's what keeps me doing these radio shows. If I didn't believe that we still have the ability to rise above all of this and to turn things around, I wouldn't bother. I'd simply go and enjoy life. I'd probably become indulgent and go and do all the things that I've always wanted to do just to get my fun in before the whole ship goes down in flames. And I can understand that many people have that attitude. That's what they feel they should do. I think that many people feel hopeless in the face of all of this. But I don't. I don't feel hopeless because I don't have any fear of death. I don't have any fear of what comes after this experience. I know I'm here to make a difference while I'm here. I think that many people have come here because we decided to come here and to be on the front line. I think that that is the purpose of my life, is to be on the front line and to do what I'm doing. I think I'm actually on my perfect path in life at the moment. I think I avoided the path for a long time because I was too distracted as well. And I never really viewed myself as being someone who had any power. I always felt like I was a little person who simply couldn't make a difference. But then I discovered that I wasn't. I discovered that I was actually very powerful because I discovered that I was the same as everybody else, and I realized that all of the people that have done all the damage on the planet are just people like me. They're no better or no worse than me. They're just people who had an idea, and they were able to put that idea into practice. Well, I've got an idea too. My idea was that I could change the world if people would simply put down all their stuff and readjust their perspective of reality. And I had an idea that if enough people heard me offer these suggestions to them, that they would change and that the world would change. I still have that idea. I still believe that that idea can come to fruition. And so I continue to do what I do, regardless of the consequences, regardless of the outcome, regardless of whatever happens in my own personal life. Because to me, it's not about that. It's about making a difference while you're here. It's about a legacy. It's about what you leave behind. Because the world is in a state of complete disrepair at the moment, ladies and gentlemen, and it's in that state because people aren't paying attention. And those people who are paying attention are simply pointing the finger at others and pointing the blame at others. People are pointing the blame at government for all that they do. Well, the people in government are just corporate entities working for the corporate people they work for. They're all programmed. They're not really to blame for what they do. Who is to blame are the people who are allowing themselves to be ruled by other people who lack the integrity to carry out the task they have been appointed. And that's the problem, folks. The problem is that our servants have taken over the mansion and we are not prepared to rein our servants in and to take responsibility for the actions we are allowing them to get away with. That's the problem, folks. See, it all comes down to us. It's always come down to us. It's always come down to what is there within our hearts. And so therefore the solution also lies with what is in our hearts and our choice as to whether to apply that to the world around us. You see, no one's going to come and save you. No Saviour is going to appear from the heavens and suddenly make things right. No one is going to suddenly ascend to fifth dimension. I mean, what makes people think they are even worthy of ascension or worthy of any rapture or worthy of going to heaven if they have, through their non-participation, allowed this paradisical planet on which we live to turn into hell? That's the question that people need to be asking. What have you done today to improve the world in which you live? What have you done to alert people to the dangers that we're facing and the very serious situation, the serious threat we are facing from our elected trustees? What have you done to help protect the water table in your country? What have you done to alert others to their own personal power? What have you done to express your own? These are the questions we should be asking ourselves each day, because it isn't until we do this and we start implementing some of these things in our own lives that we're going to see change come about. You know, if you're not seeing change in your community, perhaps it's because you're not implementing any. You know, we all live in very divided communities. Your circle of friends is probably very small. You may live in a large town, but you only know a few dozen people. What about all the other hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people who live in the same city as you? You don't know what they're thinking and you don't know what they're doing, and that's why you can't see any change. But there are little groups like this all through our cities. When I travelled around the world in 2012, I saw pockets of resistance everywhere I went. I saw people who wanted change, but yet I saw division within their own communities. It's actually been really nice to see on the Gold Coast in Queensland that there has been a community initiative started called the Village Circle, which is working to unite the community and bring about solid community action and inspire community initiatives and get people involved with each other. It's really great to see this happening. And this should be happening in every town around the planet, every town in the Western world. You need to start having community meetings again. You need to start getting together with your neighbours and discussing these issues, and doing it in as public and open a format as possible. That's where change is going to come from, folks. It's going to come when people begin taking on the knowledge that they've gleaned from shows such as this one and implementing it into their own communities. That's when change is going to come. But it's not going to come until people begin to participate. You see, it all starts with you, ladies and gentlemen, and it always has. That's where the remedy can be found, and it's the only place in which the remedy will ever be found, because that's where it lies, folks, remedy lies in the hearts of the people. It lies with you, and it lies with everyone you know. And as I said, folks, I have faith in the human race. I still have faith in our ability to overcome all the problems that we face. Sure, I don't think everybody is going to survive. I think a lot of people are not going to make it through the coming crunch. But I think we still can make it through. As a species, I think we'll make it. I really do. I don't think human consciousness will be held back by a bunch of mad scientists and insane psychopaths bent on destroying the world. I think eventually people are going to wake up to the fact that the world's being destroyed around them. I think even the brain-dead morons in police uniform are going to wake up to the fact that they are working to destroy their planet, even though they don't realise it. The problem is that most people are fixated on their own tiny lives. They think it's all about their experience, and it doesn't matter what happens after because they're not going to be around, and so they don't care. So they just get what they can while they're here, and they don't give a thought to any damage that they may be causing by being alive and any damage they may be leaving behind for the people who come after. People don't view their life as a time of custodianship for future generations anymore. People feel that they were owed something by their parents, not that they owe something to their children. And that's the unfortunate part about it. But again, it's a program. It's a result of this society. It's a result of this education system. People are quite literally trained to think this way from birth. And so it's a very difficult hurdle. And it's something that really does make the battle that we're facing a lot more difficult and a lot harder to overcome. But it's simply an obstacle that we have to deal with. It's just the way things are. You know, it's a very clever system. You've got to really tip your hat to it in that respect. It certainly is a clever system, which really makes one question where it came from, who thought this whole thing up, because it's pretty out of left field. When you look at human consciousness, I really don't think this society and this civilization is something we would ever have come up with on our own. It just doesn't seem natural to humankind at all. And no matter how I look at it and which way I analyse it, I can't see how, by our own means, we would ever have got so far off track of what we should be. Because if we were left to our natural devices, this type of civilization is simply not something we would come up with. And people may argue that and say, well, obviously we would because we did. But I don't know, I just wonder if there has been some type of intervention from some area, whether it was human intervention or non-human intervention, even if it was just clever people who thought this idea up and figured, well, once we let the population increase enough, if we can program them into this way of thinking, eventually everything in the world is going to transfer into our hands. Maybe they were just very, very clever people that saw that this plan was viable, and so they put it into action and didn't mind it taking 300 or 400 years or 2,000 or 3,000 years for it to come to fruition. But whatever it is, it's a very clever plan, and it just doesn't seem natural to humankind. But that's, again, something I can just speculate on. What's most important at the moment is figuring out how to deprogram the people who work within the system in order to be able to implement the freedom that we need and the steps that we need to take to get back to freedom. And of course, the people that need deprogramming the most of all are the police. As I said before, the police are truly the biggest threat the world faces in 2014. The police of modern society, these brain-dead morons that are working to protect corporatism, are the biggest problem we face in the modern world. Simply because these are the very people who should be standing to help the people. And these are the people we should be able to look towards for support and guidance and help in addressing the rampant corporatism in the world today. But unfortunately, they are a major part of it. Usually quite unbeknownst to themselves, simply because, as I said, they very often just don't have the mental capacity to be able to really view the situation for what it is. And that's a truly unfortunate thing. But again, it's something that we have allowed to happen ourselves simply by our failure to pay attention to reality around us and our non-participation in the construction of our social and political systems. And we should participate, folks, because ultimately what we're doing is we're participating through our non-participation. That's how all of this is constructed. Whether we participate or whether we don't, it is constructed via whichever parameters we apply to it. And if we aren't going to participate in the construction of the rules which constrain us, then we are going to get what we get. And we're going to get other people's rules which will constrain us, but will leave them free. And that is due entirely to our non-participation in the world in which we live. Well, a non-participation in the systems which govern us anyway. I mean, we're participating in the world, but usually it's simply by running on the treadmill and collecting the paper that we need in order to pay to be alive. And to me, that is not really participating. You know, like I said last week, folks, we are all combined, each individual on the planet, when put together as one collective, we are the architects of human destiny. We are the architects of our own future. And the future we construct will be a result of either our participation or our non-participation. But either way, whether we choose to participate or not, we are still the architects of our own destiny. And I think it's important for people to realize that. We literally construct our own future via the actions that we take every moment of every day. Whether we choose to simply indulge ourselves or keep ourselves focused on the collection of paper, to keep ourselves focused on climbing rungs on the social ladder and supporting the economic model, or whether we simply choose to have a voice and to speak out. I mean, you can still participate in the economic and social models that you believe is real, but always take the moral high ground in what you do and speak out when you see a problem. When you see government doing something which is removing the rights of somebody, speak out about it. Make your voice heard, because it's important that your voice is heard. If your voice isn't heard, if you are simply silent in the face of corruption, in the face of environmental degradation and corporate corruption, then you are consenting to these crimes being committed. You're consenting simply by your failure to address the situation, by your failure to speak out, because silence is acquiescence. That's the thing. Someone once said, and maybe it was Martin Luther King or Einstein or somebody said, that the world isn't evil because evil exists. It's evil because people allow evil to exist. And that's the problem. You know, someone who is silent in the face of corruption and crime is as guilty as the perpetrator. And that's a fact of life, folks. So if we are not making a difference, if we are not speaking out about that which we see right in front of our faces, then we are all guilty of contributing to that crime. And that's the bottom line, folks. And that's why change can only ever come from the people themselves. And it can come so simply. It can come so easily. I really believe this, folks. I really, really do. You know, and we can go to these protests, we can go to these blockades, we can march in the street, we can write letters, we can do all these things, but until we have a united community, nothing's going to change. You know, and it is good that we go to blockades, that we go to protests, that we write the letters and we do what we can, but you've got to apply yourself to your community. You really do. And if you are not in the right heart space, it's not going to work. Even with the letters that you write and the protests and blockades you go to, you're not going to make a difference unless you approach the matter from the correct heart space, unless you question authority, and unless you truly know who and what you are enough to respect the people around you. That's the thing, folks. We've really got to come back to that, and it's all there. The whole thing is there. If we can change our heart space and change our perspective, we can change the world in a day. I've been saying this to you for so long, and it really is true. And I'm sure if you really sit down and consider what I've been saying, consider the importance of it, and consider what impact it would have. Just imagine what it would be like if everybody changed their perspective and started to view themselves as valid and view the people around them as valid, and stop profiting from people and judging people by what they look like or what they wear or what their belief system is. Just think how easily we could change the world. Because we could, folks. We could do it very, very simply. And don't say to me, look, you're never going to get people to do that, because, as I said, what you're saying is you're never going to get me to do that. But it all starts with you. If you choose to change your perspective and start applying it to the world around you, you're going to find that your life changes. My life certainly did when I started doing this. And then you will see how simple it would be to change the world. But it has to start somewhere, folks. It's got to start in some community, someone within that community who's willing to create ripples. So why not let that person be you? Because that's how it starts, folks. It starts on the ground, and it starts with you, and it could start any time you choose to implement these changes into your life. It could start now. And once it does start, there's no going back. Once it starts, that's how we change things. That's how we change the world. A global shift in consciousness. But it has to start somewhere. And this isn't any new age thing. I'm just trying to find a way out of this without violence, because we don't have the good weapons, folks. There's no good getting violent with government. Government has all the good weapons. That's what's such a big obstacle to any type of violent revolution. That's why the people of the country need to be armed. All people of all countries need to be armed. And I'm not one who supports weapons at all. But if the people don't possess as good a weapons as their government has, then the people are leaving themselves open for tyranny and open for dictatorship. And that's exactly what we're getting in the world today. That's why America is so intent on disarming its people, saying you don't need these assault weapons for hunting. Well, America doesn't have weapons for hunting. It has weapons as the last line of defense against government. That's what the First Amendment is for, and that's why it should never, ever be taken away. The American people, when you look at how out of control the American government is, you realize that it's a government controlled by Zionists and banksters anyway. It doesn't really have anything to do with the American people. It's a government designed to go out and wage war all around the world at the whim of international banking cartels. Then it becomes very apparent that the only people who can stop that military machine are the people of the United States themselves. And that's why it's important for the people of the United States to keep their guns. If the people of the United States have their weapons removed from them, then there is very little hope of humanity ever recovering from the global situation. Because the only thing that can stop this military machine truly is the people of the United States themselves. We can do what we can in our countries, and we can do what we can to rein our governments in and get them to stop supporting this corrupt system. But ultimately, if we're going to stop the military machine, then we need the people of the United States to stand up and rein their government back under control. That's the bottom line with that one. Yes, folks, it certainly is a pretty pickle that we've got ourselves in, and we certainly do have a lot of obstacles to overcome in order to find our way back. But as I said, I think we can do it. I still believe that the human race will overcome all of these issues and all of these problems. I really don't think there's going to be any hope of holding human consciousness back, folks, regardless of what the powers that believe they be attempt. This is simply why this is all happening at this time. I think it's a very, very important time in human history, and it's a wonderful time to be alive, because this is the time when change happened. This is the change that we've been waiting for so many centuries, and it's happening right now, and we're all part of it. All we have to do is get involved. But look, that is it for me for the show today, folks. Thank you to anybody who has ever helped with thecrowhouse.com. Thank you to anybody who made a contribution to the Indiegogo campaign. Thank you for anybody who has ever offered anything to attempt to keep this show on the air. It is the only thing that keeps it going, and things are getting very tight indeed. But I will keep going for as long as I can, and I hope to bring these shows to you for as long as is necessary to bring them to you. It would be nice if I didn't have to anymore. It would be nice if the world would just change. But again, that is up to each one of us. And all it would take would be for each of us to apply ourselves. But that is it for me, folks. I'm now completely out of time. It's been a pleasure having your company on the air today, and I'll look forward to speaking to you again next week. Please take good care until then. In Lakesh.